City Planning Commission meeting to order Thursday, October 14th. We're going to go start off with agenda item number 1, which is opening and approval minutes of our last meeting, September 23rd, 2021. Anybody have any comments? At this point, I would usually ask Steve for a motion, but Toby, since you're in that spot.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for the September 23rd meeting.
Okay.
I'll second.
Awesome. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so be moved. Number 2 is a conditional use permit for major B home occupation for Ava Flooring at 309 East Shepherd. Staff, I believe, Mindy, you're going to take this one?
I sure am.
Awesome.
So Adam Andresen, he lives at 309 East Shepherd Lane. We are doing a conditional use permit for his major home occupation for flooring installation / contractor. He will not have any employees. He basically will be going on site where the materials will all be delivered there and putting the flooring in. So there will not be any delivery there at the home, and there will not be any signage out in front. His truck is what he'll use, but he will be stored nightly in his driveway. So staff is recommending approval of the proposed conditional use permit for a major home occupation B at the listed address at 309 East Shepherd Lane.
Okay. Staff, any questions for Mindy?
Just a question for you guys. So our monitors are not displaying, is that? Yep.
Anybody got questions for Mindy regarding this?
Have we had any
The
comments?
applicant is here if needed.
Sure.
I think, I don't have any questions, but I have comments. Are we jumping in on that?
Let's go ahead. Let's get the applicant up here first. Good with that? Adam, you want to come up here and just basically speak into the mic, state your name, address, and just anything you want to say about it?
Yeah, I'm Adam Andresen.
A little bit closer since it's got to be recorded and
Yeah,
transcribed.
my name is Adam Andresen. Home address is 309 East Shepherd Lane.
Okay.
Basically just going to be operating from my home. Well, mostly just installing flooring on site, and pretty much any kind of office work is going to be conducted on my phone, so pretty much everything is going to be mobile. Any tools that I store will mostly be in my vehicle, and yeah, I won't have any employees, I won't have any signage. That's about all I could tell you earlier.
Okay, cool. I mean, it looks like you have a pretty large lot. It looks like you've got a storage in the back if need be, right? But I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Any members of the commission have any questions for Adam? Okay. Thank you, Adam.
Yep, you bet. Thank you.
Okay, do we want to, any discussions, comments?
I mean, the comment I was going to make is basically that many of the foreseeable detrimental impacts that might come to the neighborhood because of a use like this are not existent here. I mean, there's no materials being stored, there's no employees coming and going, there's no deliveries coming and going. Basically, it sounds like the neighbors aren't going to see any difference functionally here. So I don't see that we even need to impose any conditions on this conditional use.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody on the commission? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion
Okay.
to approve a conditional use permit for a major home occupation B for a flooring installation contractor for Adam Andresen on 309 East Shepherd Lane.
I'll second.
Okay, great. We'll start voting.
Aye.
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 Okay, so unanimous. Shall be passed. Going on to Item number 3, conditional use permit for a major B home occupation for Burke McMillan or McLean at 1841 Carriage Lane. And again, I believe, Mindy, you've got this one?
Sure do. Mr. McMillan is requesting a permit for his major home occupation for landscaping, yard care, lighting, and snow removal. It sounds like he does it all at the address listed above. He is not here this evening. However, he just shared that he is the main employee. He's hired out youth as just contractors doing a 1099 on an as-needed basis. So he has 1 truck, 1 trailer, and 1 loader for his business that should all be stored. He said that they should all fit onto his property and stored there. So we, as a staff, are recommending a conditional use permit, an approval of a conditional use permit for the timber cuts business.
Okay. Staff, any questions Commission, any questions for the staff or Mindy?
You guys are super talkative tonight.
Dan, did you say that you had some comments on this one?
Yeah, I actually had a phone call today. A gentleman was concerned about him parking out on the street. I talked to the police about it, and they said between the months, he's perfectly legal to do it. It'd be like just anybody else driving their car home from work. I called and made sure that the police was okay with it before I called him back, and I talked to the gentleman and pretty much left it at that. So he must not have showed up, so he may have, but that's pretty much what I was with him.
So looking at this map here, and so I imagine, like right now, as it stands, truck, trailer, loader can be parked anywhere. Obviously, during the winter months, that's not the case. I can see the truck and possibly trailer on the pad, but where would that, I guess, possibly the trailer or the loader go? Do we have any idea? I mean, it's I see the backyard, but the backyard parallels the street.
I was looking at it today when I was talking to the gentleman. He has RV pad stuff on the north side of the house.
Okay.
I think that's where he would be storing it during the winter months.
Okay.
And then he's got the long yard on the south side that really not imposing in front of anybody's house other than somebody across the street. And that actual person I think I was talking to isn't in that general vicinity. He just...
So looking at the
close.
satellite imagery, it looks like that lot in the back that you're talking about that parallels the street, though, looks like that's a vinyl fencing, I'm assuming. So is there like a gate that would open up so he can put his loader or trailer? Do we know that? Or?
I don't believe so. I never
Okay.
really paid attention to it. But he does have that long driveway with the RV pad on the south side. That's pretty much what, when I went and put the signs on, that's what I noticed mostly.
And does that, I mean, looking at, again, at the satellite imagery, it looks like there's something parked there already, so I think that'd be my only concern is, during the winter, where is he going to park it? And if there is that vinyl fence on that side, is there a gate, I guess? It would have been nice to have the applicant here. I mean, just out of curiosity, staff, when you guys are talking with the applicants, are you advising them to be here just to answer any questions, or we may table it and ask them to come back?
Yeah, we tell them the meeting dates and times that we expect to have it on and encourage them to attend. We only get to meet twice a month, and whether it works for them or not, we will see applicants here tonight, but sometimes they can't. So typically what we tell them in the event they know they're not available, as Mindy was aware, is we'll try it. Worst case scenario, you're welcome to table it as a commission. If you don't have the information you need to make a decision, there's no reason you have to move forward with something you're not comfortable with. And then perhaps a solution to this could be if you want him to park it off the street and you want to enforce that, you could place the condition, and if you're not certain that pad is going to work or not, he'll have to propose and find a way to do it anyway, and that could include pouring more concrete or making it work on his property, right? So if that's your condition, it could be open-ended enough where they can figure out a solution as to how to address it. But it's up to you as the commission on where you'd like to go.
Commissioners, thoughts on that?
I mean, I guess just to clarify, the concern is basically that, you know, parking on the street is to be expected, and I think it is fine in a residential zone on the street like this, so long as it's what you would expect to see from residential traffic. But if it becomes trailers and equipment and that sort of thing, that starts to go a little bit beyond what we would expect in a residential zone. And you know, because this is a conditional use, we're not saying that that's completely out of the question here. It's just maybe it does have to be always in that RV pad, or maybe if the applicant wanted, it's back in this, you know, backyard rear portion of their property where it's still allowing them to use the property as they need or want, but it's not imposing that impact on the street. So I think at least that's what I identify as the issue, and I don't know I don't know the proper solution, but that's what we have to think through, I guess.
So, if I may, Mr. Chair, just as an example, so we have in the past, through the Planning Commission, imposed a condition to the likes of trailers and construction equipment related to the business shall not park on the street. So you don't have to say exactly where it's got to go and how, but just the fact that it can't be on the street, and then they could address it in that matter, I think would be in your purview. But if you do want to be more specific, then, and if you'd like to speak with the applicant, those are also in your purview as well to choose to go that direction.
Personally, I would like that type of approach, because then it allows them to create the solution that they want.
Yeah.
If he wants to always park on the RV pad and he doesn't want to have to pour another pad of concrete somewhere else, then great, and it solves the problem. If he wants to use his RV pad for something else, then he would have to find another place to put it off the street.
So that solution, though, would allow him to park his truck on the street, because that's essentially like any other residence, right? It's allowed to park on the street.
The way I worded it, yes. And again, you could determine that it's okay as trailer and other equipment's on the street too. So whatever items you think are inappropriate, if you can justify it based on, you know, that standard of the impacts it would have on the neighborhood, then you could pick and choose what's appropriate or not. Yeah, I would think as staff and as far as enforcement, if it's a passenger vehicle, a truck, or you know, it's going to be very difficult for us to go after and enforce on that it can't be there.
Yeah. I guess I also want to note that I had one of the neighbors call me also, just to voice their opinion that they would rather not have equipment parked on the street. So.
Okay. You know, again, yeah, I mean, I look at the satellite imagery, it looks like something is parked there right now. Looks like, I would assume there'd be enough space. So then the question isn't space, but more of a blight and what the neighborhood's looking for. My thoughts. Just out of curiosity, is anybody here to talk about this particular agenda item by chance? Okay. Sir, if you could come up here and yep, just state your name for the record, please.
My name is Zane Larson. I'm not related to this at all, but I would just like advice. I don't know, take it or leave it, whatever. But any sort of equipment that a pickup truck, even if it's a 1-ton truck, can pull, isn't that large, and likely the individual would be storing equipment on his trailer if he was space limited, and so it wouldn't take up any more space than the trailer is wide. It can't be larger than the trailer, which is legally allowed on the roads, and just that, you know, my opinion is splitting a lot of hairs over a truck trailer that he could own no matter what, whether it was business, and do whatever the heck he wanted with it, business. The only possible concern I would see would be it's a, you know, the tractor or whatever it is, but that's probably just one of those really tiny bobcat things, probably what he does, because it's landscaping, right? I've seen those, I've had those at my place. Just, you know, anyways, that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
On the screen, just briefly, this is a better image of the
Oh,
property.
I see, yeah. Yep.
Plenty of
So you can see how large the RV pad is on the north end. We would believe he's got space certainly to fit it, if that's where it needs to be. And And just Mindy's here telling me that's what the applicant has told us he plans to do with it.
Right, so the question in this picture is that RV, okay, on the neighbors, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but let's just, I guess, get it out there to Mr. Larson's point. If where your hand just was there, Lyle, I don't, I'm assuming north is up, so on the southwest portion of that there, if this property owner, let's say, owned a truck and a boat, there's nothing in our ordinances that say he couldn't park his truck and his boat along that street permanently there, and that's where he parks his truck and his boat. So if that is what is currently allowed and would never ever be an enforcement issue, the neighbors might not like it, but they wouldn't have any say about it, then why would we make an issue over a same truck with a trailer, and instead of a boat on the trailer, some loader? So, I mean, I think that's a very valid point. I do think as a compromise or as an easy solution is, and if the applicant's already planning on using the RV pad and we just say park on the RV pad and he doesn't have a problem with that, which we don't know the answer because he's not here, that would be the easy solution. But I mean, I think Zane makes a valid point.
I completely agree. Having said that, again, if the applicant didn't make ask for this conditional use permit, yep, he could park whatever he wanted. But the fact that an applicant is asking for a conditional use permit, so then that's where our purview comes in. It's kind of a weird situation. He's doing the right thing. Having said that, there's limitations put on that.
But I guess what I would say is we only have to impose conditions if there's a detrimental impact. And if it's something that is already, in my opinion, there's no difference of impact. There is no detrimental impact between parking a truck and a boat and a truck and a trailer with a piece of equipment on it. That's the same impact, and therefore there's no additional condition that's needed there.
Can I add one more thing? When I was talking to the person calling me, is I asked him, point out, I says, does it sit there a long time? He says, no. He drives it every day. He parks it. He comes home, goes to bed probably, gets up in the morning, goes back to work. So, I mean, it's not like it's sitting there all the time. It's a mobile, it's his truck, it's his car to go to work.
Yeah.
And that the guy that was making the complaint admitted that straight up to me, because I just straight up asked him if it sat there a lot. So that's what I got to.
Yeah, I mean, common sense would tell us that Mr. McLean is going to do like what you said, drive it on a regular basis. Having said that, part of what we do is look for unintended consequences. What if the business picks up next year, booms because of whatever rules and regulations are coming down the line for landscaping, and then now he's got 2 trailers and he's got additional. Then I think that becomes a potential issue. So that's what we've always done, is looked out for the interest of the neighbors, and they may not be thinking of that, but we've seen a lot of different cases where that could happen. So just some food for thought for my fellow commissioners.
What's the current trailer ordinance?
So as stated by the commission, people can have trailers. It's considered a vehicle. They're allowed on the street. It's during the normal portion of the year, it's 48 hours. So if you can't leave it there forever, same with any car. And then it comes in the wintertime, then you can't park it overnight on the street. So you can use the streets year round, but it's just a limited amount of time it can stay there, and then not overnight during the winter.
Wait, so clarify, maybe I misunderstood. So to use my boat example, not the equipment trailer, but the boat example, someone couldn't park their truck and boat on the street permanently.
Correct, not permanently.
Okay.
But they could do it. So there are some restrictions, again, on the time frame. So if your passenger car were left for 3 or 4 days on the street, technically that would be in violation, so we'll go after stuff that's out there long-term, even if it's a sedan, license, you name it, technically we have that ability. The other portion of it, if something is oversized, so a semi-trailer, for example, large RVs, other equipment, the idea is they can use the street for parking, but for loading and unloading, so that it's just really for a couple hours. The oversized vehicles are supposed to be using the street. But most standard passenger or residential trailers and vehicles are allowed up to the 48 hours. I think 26 feet, I was reminded, I think is that length distinction as to when it's more the short term versus long term.
So the only provision that I see that in our code that relates to this is there is a restriction for these types of home occupations. It says vehicles over 22 feet in length, including trailers, shall not be parked on the street nor within the abutting street. So
And that's already in
really
there.
the only restriction that we've got in our code.
I mean, I think the easy solution then is, and if the applicant sounds like they don't have a problem with it, is we just impose the condition that the trucks and the equipment need to be parked on that RV pad or somewhere else on the property, just not on the street. And it might be different if the applicant's saying, no, I don't want that, but the applicant's saying, yeah, that's what I'm planning on doing anyway, so there's no harm, no foul, I guess.
Well, yeah, but I mean, technically, it's not a condition we can impose because it's not one we're allowed to impose.
What do you mean?
Do we have a detrimental impact? And you identified saying it's no more detrimental than somebody with a pickup truck and a boat trailer. And so it's hard to argue that there's a detrimental impact from anything other than a 22-foot trailer being parked on the street.
But what I would say is when Lyle said that, this is his business that's going to be here all the time, and so this stuff is going to have to be parked wherever it's parked for more than 48 hours at a time at some points during the year.
True.
And therefore goes beyond what is allowed,
beyond what the city
and it could be,
ordinance
and therefore could be seen as a detrimental impact.
Yeah. So maybe the condition should be that anytime vehicles are over 20 or under 22 feet in length are parked on the street, they cannot be parked for more than 48 hours. Something like that.
So Lyle, is that 48 hours straight? Because I feel like if he leaves and goes to work and comes back and parks it again at night, does it just start over every time he does that?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so we don't chalk tires and that type of deal, but somebody can't move it 10 feet and every 5 minutes and call that. But yes, if they leave for the day and come back, clock resets. So.
Okay.
I have chalk tires though before for the records.
I mean, in practicality, it looks like that there's not going to be a problem here because he's got a pad that he can put his truck and equipment on. So looks like it'll work.
And just like Lyle's mentioned, I mean, we have put conditions on in the past, so it's within our purview. Is that what
If you can find the nexus to justify it, yes, you may do the condition.
Okay, there you go. Commissioners, thoughts? Usually this is a somewhat easy one, but not too sure why.
I think if the applicant were here and he would have said, I have no problem doing that, yeah, no big deal, we probably wouldn't have been carrying on this long.
Yeah, very true.
So is there a way that we can conditionally approve this conditional use permit? So as long as when you talk to him, Lyle, that he agrees to, just to confirm that he won't or whatnot park it.
What I would say is put the condition on there that as a commission you feel is necessary, and if the applicant has concerns with that, we'll bring it back and have them discuss it with you at a future meeting. Okay. Otherwise, they'll be working under the conditions that you place. Okay. If you don't put conditions, they're probably not going to come back asking for more. But make sure it is reasonable. If you can justify it, it ought to at least be debatable at the very least, and it sounds like there is some debate. We don't foresee as staff that there's really going to be issue with that based on what we've been represented from the applicant.
Commissioners, anybody want to take a stab at this?
I'll make a motion that we approve the conditional use permit for major home occupation B, landscaping, yard care, lighting, and snow removal for Burke McMillan with the condition that truck and equipment be stored off-street. Is that what that's what we decided, right? Or was it just off-street as long as it doesn't go over 48 hours?
Well,
Good point.
So to be technically within our ordinance and with the parameters of the law, I'd say that the truck and equipment, anything under 22 feet, anything over 22 feet cannot be stored on the street. Under 22 feet, it can be on the street for up to 48 hours.
Okay, what Wilf said. Okay. Make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for a major home occupation B, landscaping, yard care, lighting, and snow removal for Burke McMillan at 1841 Carriage Lane with the condition that anything over 22 feet not be stored on the street and anything under 22 feet not be stored on the street for more than 48 hours.
Per the ordinance, right?
For the ordinance.
There's our nexus right there.
I'll second that.
Okay, votings, we'll start with Jared?
Aye.
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 Okay. Next on the agenda is number 4, conditional use permit for a model home for Perry Homes located at 212 Westgate Lane. I believe, Dan, you have this one?
Yes, sir, I've got this one. This one's down on the bottom of 2nd North, that new Perry subdivision going in. Just, you can see that yellow box south of the church there. It's like the first or second lot going in. The house is built. Normally we allow for them to have a model home, and these guys are showing that they're going to have the usual construction signs as shown there. They're going to meet the size and requirements for zoning. Normally, the ordinance will allow for us to re-up it every year. We have in the past. They straight up says they're going to take about 3 to 5 years to build these houses out. They want to just maintain the same model home. So I'm just bringing that up because if you want, you can approve it for the 3 to 5 years or whenever the completion is, so that you don't have to look at it every year. I was going to make that point right up front. But we allow for them. They're doing everything that we feel that they should do as proposed with their site plan, and the home's already built. They have plenty of parking. Their hours are going to be 11 to 7, I believe. So I don't see any big conditions to impose on this. I'll leave it at that.
Commissioners, any question for Dan? I'm assuming the applicant is here?
I believe so.
Okay. Or representative? Okay. Does anybody have any comments on this? Anybody here? Did we also get any comments submitted?
I didn't get any comments whatsoever on this one, no.
Okay. Well, commissioners?
I make a motion that we approve the conditional use permit for a model home for Perry Homes at 212 North Westgate Lane, as presented, with the stipulation that we will allow for that for up to 5 years or until the lots are all sold, whichever comes first.
We'll second that.
Okay. Voting starts with you.
Aye.
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 Okay.
Could I make a quick footnote on that?
Yep.
Just to suggest, and maybe to staff. Lyle maybe can correct me if I'm wrong, but since I've been on the commission, which I think was 2014 or 15, and even the short stint a few years before that, I've probably seen half dozen, maybe a dozen at the most, model home conditional use permits I can't remember conditions that we've imposed, and my suggestion would be that we just draft an ordinance that addresses them specifically, because I think that the world of concerns is very narrow, and it seems like we could just have an ordinance that says model homes have to meet X, Y, Z, and then we don't have to see it and they don't have to worry about it, and it just gets done.
I'd second that.
Yeah. Okay. You'll always have a job.
You get to approve them. You
Yeah,
can look
actually,
at them
yeah.
and approve them.
Doesn't need to go for us.
Yeah, we job security.
Yeah,
for you.
actually, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 5, final flat approval for Heritage Square Phase 2 subdivision for Justin Bennett. Dan, you also have that one?
Yes, sir, that's me again. If you'll remember this one, it come in several times. This is he's on the B section. Lyle's got the little red dot going around the box. There's 2 units there. He's doing the 3rd unit. That's a picture of it right there he's showing. We've had the pre-construction or pre-construction meeting. We've had all the utilities looked at by our utility identities, sewer, water. Electrical's been diagrammed out how they're going to do it. Everything's into play, so it will work out for it. We see no alterations of after doing that from the preliminary plat. It's identical. So we're just asking for recommend approval for the final plat for Heritage Subdivision at whatever the address is, 575 West Mutton Hollow Road.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions for Dan regarding this? And as Dan said, this has come before us, and we did ask the applicant, I think, to.
So Dan, this matches the preliminary.
Yes, sir. And it's been all looked at through. We had a pre-construction. I don't know. We call pre-cons now, and everybody's looked at it. It's going to work as far as utilities. Everything's there'd be nothing building it that would alter the plat.
Okay.
I'm pretty familiar with the, since I live right down the street, drive by it every day, so, you know, haven't seen anything crazy. Anybody here to make public comments in regards to this? Okay, good. Commissioners?
Make a motion that we approve final plat for Phase 2 of the Heritage Square subdivision.
I'll second it.
Okay, well, it's up to me. Aye.
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 Okay, so it's moved. Okay, moving on to number 6, final plat approval for Mutton Hollow Townhome subdivision for Destination Homes. Dan, you also have this one?
Yes, sir. I believe I got this one too. Same thing. We've seen this one quite a few times. It's down on the Main Street, Mutton Hollow corner there. They have submitted the preliminary plat. It shows all the same units as the final plat now. And we have had meetings on this one too. Everything's in line with what's been approved on the preliminary plat. We recommend that this one, final plat, be approved as well.
Commissioners, any questions for Dan?
One minor question. So the sidewalk along Main Street, it looks like and then there's the bus shelter or something. I can't quite tell. Is the intent that connects to that sidewalk in the development, or are they going to be like separated? Is there going to be a fence there or something? Do we know? I mean, actually, it looks like a fence on this picture.
I do not know that for sure. I think that was never an issue.
Yeah, is that a fence or is that the property line on this image?
Yeah, the applicants here can probably address it. It probably does show a fence within the image, but if we need to have that open, perhaps you'd like to address that. Ms. Ross Kelly with Destination Homes is here, and maybe she could help us on that.
sorry, Amy Ross Kelly, Destination Homes. There is a 3-rail fence, and that's what you're seeing there. There's going to be concrete and brick columns on both sides of the bus stop that will allow, so there'll actually be 2 with a walkway on one side and 2 with a walkway on the other side. So there'll be like a collector sidewalk on our piece, and then an opening on both sides of the bus stop so they can go through the fence and into the bus stop. So that's kind of, we worked with the UTA a little bit to see if there was something we could do to move that or modify it. And they said, we're happy to do whatever we can move it because of where the approach is for Tasties. That if the bus stopped there, because we just thought if we shifted to the proper lane, but the bus stops there, it blocks that approach. And so we said, well, we'll just leave it and we'll put some concrete pillars around it and just try to clean it up a little bit so that it looks like we meant to have it there. And then I think the only other thing that we addressed from preliminary to now was we widened the interior street on there. That was the one request that we had, and so we fixed that, and I think everything else is good to go. Any questions for me?
Anybody?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we get any comments on this via email or? No. Okay.
Well, we generally don't ask for public comments. I'll ask, is anybody here to talk about that? Okay. Commissioners, discussions?
Looks like what we approved in the preliminary. With that, I'd make a motion to, we do the final approval on this, right? To approve the final plat from Mutton Hollow Townhomes at 67 South Main Street as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, vote goes to you.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so moved. Okay, next one is agenda item number 7, public hearing for Kaysville General Plan Amendment. And I do believe Lyle.
Yeah, I'll introduce this briefly. So our consultant is here this evening, Sam, with Landmark Design, and he's actually got some of his team available online via Zoom. You can look at this little tiny window here on the screen, so some of them may have some other items to add or say. I think most important this evening is we're here to understand more of what the public wants to say about this as we continue to bring in feedback and input. So I'll turn the time over to Sam. He's got some slides and things just to kind of remind everyone that is here a couple key points on this, and then just remind the chair again, we're looking for the public hearing, and you're welcome to, after that point, discuss as much as you will to maybe provide direction, I think, to the consulting team as you're prepared tonight. And again, if you need more time to chew on things and provide more of that input at a later time, that's appropriate as well. But so with that, I'll invite Sam to come present.
Great. And Lyle, I'm assuming that all the comments, the public comments, the suggestion cards have been forwarded to Sam already? You got it? Okay, awesome.
Good evening. Good to see you all. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of where we've been through this process, largely for the benefit of the public. This general plan process commenced before the start of the pandemic, so that pandemic slowed this process down a little bit and gave us some challenges, but we've been able to move forward along the way. So, Lyle, can you? Thank you. So I'm just going to do a quick recap of our process through all of this and where we've come from and where we're headed. So in order to get a sense of existing additions and also to hear from the public and through a community engagement process, we used a variety of different things. We have a plan advisory committee that has that we've been working with through this process, and they've been giving their input, composed of members of the public, City Council, Planning Commission. We've had a webpage sort of as a tracking and clearinghouse of information going, so folks can keep an eye on this. And then we've had a three-prong community engagement process throughout the early phase of the project, beginning with a scoping meeting and a public workshop, which were both held online, and then also a statistically valid survey, which was administered by Y2 Analytics. Once we received all of that information, we moved into developing concepts in the draft plan. And that has been posted and available for public comment for the last couple weeks now. And now we're moving into this draft plan refinement stage. So from what we heard from the public, the recommendations of the advisory committee, this body, and the city council will make changes to the plan and refine it to become the final plan for adoption. So there's just a quick overview, the public scoping meeting, the workshop both online, and then that survey that was conducted. So once we heard back from the community in that engagement process, we took the feedback that we heard, particularly looking at the land use pieces that came out of that survey. We asked the public which areas in Caysville they would be most in favor of seeing growth and change occur, and the consensus on that was that North Main Street, north of 200 North, and around Barnes Park were sort of the more preferred areas. And then Karen Lyle. And that the type of development that people would like to see within those areas is mixed use, retail, shopping, restaurants. Both rose to the top in both areas. Next slide, Lyle. Thank you. So we took that information and we developed a number of concepts which we shared with the Planning Commission earlier this year in a work session. And based on that feedback, we dialed it in on how this would actually work to come up with a preferred concept for how the city center could take shape over time. Next slide. We also zoomed back out and looked at the city as a whole based on the feedback that we received from the public. Primarily, the response was that single-family neighborhoods need to be preserved as single-family neighborhoods. And so that influenced a lot of land use throughout the rest of the city. Next slide, Lyle. Our transportation consultant, who you see in the upper right of your screen, he developed this transportation concept focusing on major corridors, the treatments for those, as well as other regional and community access points and how to address those. And we also, as part and concurrently through this process, worked on a Parks and Trails master plan for the city, examining the park system and the trail system in detail and making proposed recommendations for future expansion and development. All of this comes together when you stack those layers on top of each other. The general concept for the city is what we term the placemaking plan, and this is the core of the general plan draft document, which is all encapsulated in, next slide, Lana, the draft plan. So this was released 2 weeks ago, and it was put, next slide, Lyle, online for public comment, and we also had a public open house event here last week on the 6th. During the online comment period, we actually had a few more comments trickle in this afternoon, so I think we're at something like 14 or 15 now that we've had from that, and then we had 32 registered public visitors at the open house, but we may have had more that just didn't sign their entry. There were 6 comment cards submitted at that event as well. We did our best to analyze the comments and try and synthesize what was being said. And generally, I mean, with so few, it's hard to get a true representation of, you know, what everyone's saying. A lot of these comments represent probably only, you know, 2 to 3 individuals maybe. But some of the common themes we were hearing through the comments that we've received were, one, that people are generally favorable towards the plan. They're generally feel that the mixed use meets the vision that the public has for the city, particularly within the city center. As far as the city center concept was concerned, people felt it was getting too specific, particularly in showing where hospital and park designations, and so landowners were starting to freak out at the parcel level about that. Some felt that West Caysville is still not bearing the burden of density, and that too much density is happening on the east side. So those are sort of the land use concerns. There were some concerns expressed about improving traffic flow, particularly what sort of impacts does slowing traffic on Main Street have? How are we really addressing vehicle priority by putting a focus on alternative transportation? And how is this new development of the city center going to burden the existing grid? Some concern was also expressed over the new West Davis corridor exit and the land use proposed around there being the little commercial nodes. How does that interface with the residential neighborhoods? And then more minor comments that were received were specific park recommendations, wish list items that people had. We heard quite a bit actually about cost, taxes, affordability concerns, and then there are a few comments about typos. So we then took all that to the advisory committee and for their discussion. They had some items that they wanted to address as well, and so this is a list of their recommendations to change. One, they felt that the plan needed to be a little bit more approachable. It is a large document with a lot of detail, and so the feeling was that an executive summary needed to be created to provide an upfront summary that people can really digest quickly, rather than having to thumb through the whole plan. Another suggestion was to potentially separate the Parks and Recreation Plan from the general plan, to include the main tenets from that in the general plan, but to keep the detail in a separate living document. And then looking at the placemaking plan and future land use, some of the feeling was that the placemaking map should be the most general, while land use should indicate sort of just general actions rather than some of the specific detail that the land use map is getting at. Particularly with the city center concept, there's just all that feedback that we've received that it's just too specific. So trying to scale that back and make things more conceptual was a big focus of that. Regarding single family and multifamily character areas, there was some discussion of, are these specific enough or detailed enough? What is actually being proposed in these areas, because there's obviously a big range of what single family can be. And so the suggestion was to eliminate the references to single family detached and replace with a range of single family residential uses, types, and forms. So getting at allowing for a bigger range and a little bit more specificity. Looking at transportation as well. The suggestions there were to indicate how are the public concerns addressed by the proposed transportation issues. As far as regulating traffic flow, how is that actually being addressed? Think a bit more just targeted. What is this achieving? There's some of the concern was around 200 North, but as Tim has shared with us, the West Davis corridor should relieve a lot of the pressure on 200 North for the long term. So that's where the multimodal proposal is coming from. We discussed the importance of capturing the goals from the separate Main Street study that's going on right now and making sure that all of that is encapsulated within the general plan. And then there was also a discussion about alternative transportation and sustainability in general and how that's helping the city meet its sustainability goals. So all of that, those recommendations were forwarded on, I believe, to you all. And Lyle shared with me the minutes from your work session. And we're digesting that. I think that discussion has been similar to the recommendations from the advisory committee at large. And that's all I have. So.
Any questions from the commissioners to Sam before we move on to public comments or hearing portion of it? Okay. Sam, thanks.
Good summary.
Okay, so since this is a public hearing, we'll take comments from the public. Anybody here to make any comments?
Hi again, my name is Zane Larson. My main focus with the plan is that, is particularly the slowing down of Main Street. Well, that's one of the two things. Slowing down Main Street. I lived in Cache Valley for a number of years, and their Main Street was suffering from, businesses were suffering, and a lot of people were just driving on 10th West. And so the city put a school, an elementary school on 10th West to slow down the traffic there so more people drive through Main Street. Well, more people did drive through Main Street, and the businesses suffered more because the people who wanted to go down there and shop wouldn't, because people were using the roads to get past Logan. And so they effectively slowed down their Main Street, and the businesses suffered even more because the people are using Main Street here to get to north end of Caysville. They're coming up Highway 89, or they're going down to Highway 89, and we have very few ways to get to west side of Caysville. I know there is that West Davis corridor coming in, but I don't know specifics of when that's going to actually happen. But still, even when that's there, we still really only have one way to get to west side of Caysville, and that's going to require Main Street and 200 North. And slowing down 200 North, in my opinion, will only hurt the businesses more. So up in Logan, what they had to do is they had to build a fence on the elementary on 10th West, and they eminent domained some homes, and they made a 4-lane road. My brother, who lives up there in Hiram and works on 10th West, they call it I-10th. And it's actually really nice because now the people who weren't going to stop at Logan anyways aren't going through town, and they still have a big problem with Main Street still because it's because of the way old towns were designed. And then my second concern is our use of roads and trying to, I assume that's what the multimodal meant for the bicycles and that bikes are recreation. If there is one person, or there might be a handful of people in Caysville, of the 30,000 people that actually use bicycles as their primary forms of transportation, but essentially that's nobody. And so the purpose of roads should be for automobiles, to get the automobiles where they want to go, where they need to go as safely as possible. Putting bikes on the road is not safer for vehicles, it's not safer for bikes. And it actually clogs up the roads, makes lanes narrower, and I think we should do things we can to actually keep bicycles off the road or on other roads, or provide other ways to get through town that aren't using Main Street if people weren't going to stop here anyways. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
So, two items for me, I think, then I'll probably wander off.
State your name again, please.
Rob Danzy. I live here in what I like to refer to as the ghetto of Caysville off of 4th East. One of the things with the general plan, it talks about we want to preserve and protect the single-family neighborhoods, right? One of the issues we have in our neighborhood is that we have large lots, and we have an older generation of people living in those homes with large lots. The large lots are generally fronted by a small home, and when grandma dies, the grandkids come in and want to either turn it into a rental unit or put in flag lots or put in accessory dwelling units. And those are all issues that I think are somewhat, I guess, confronted in the general plan, right? Just want to make sure, once again, going back to what he was saying, that West Caysville's sharing the burden of high-density housing. We like to think that, hey, over here in East Kaysville, it's okay just to put more apartments, more external accessory dwelling units in our neighborhood because that's not where we live. It's not that big of an issue. It's already the ghetto. You know, keep throwing them in there. So keep that in mind. We've already borne our fair share of the burden. So when you're putting together the zoning or whatnot, I don't like showing up to these meetings on a quarterly basis, yearly basis, saying we don't want 6 plexes in our neighborhood on 2/10 of an acre. So whatever we can do in the general plan to ensure that I don't have to come to these meetings ever again will be beneficial. On top of that, preserving and enhancing Kaysville's historic Main Street. That's a theme that's throughout the general plan. Do we have a plan for that? I want to make sure that, the one building we have on Main Street that's on the historic preservation list is the old Kaysville Library. If that's a real goal of the general plan, let's make sure we actually save the one historic building on the Main Street. So, keeping that in mind, words, they've got to mean more than just being words, right? So, give us something to it. So, that's all I have to complain about for now. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Phil Holland. Most of you have already heard from me. I'm one of those neighbors or the landowners that freaked out. I own the 6 acres next to Les Schwab, and I do not want to see a park there. I love parks. That's not the right spot for it. I'm hoping to bring a crucial development to Kaysville City within the next 2 or 3 months on that 6 acres. So you've kind of heard that. I've sent a couple emails. I think that's a crucial property to long-term growth in Kaysville City.
Thank you. Anybody else? Public comments? Okay. Commissioners?
I think maybe this is just an FYI for those who are here, but those who either are listening or will be listening. We had a very robust and lengthy discussion yesterday in the work session, which was a public meeting, and I believe it was notified as such, but we didn't have a whole lot of public there, of course. And as I've said in a few other forums, I am a little dismayed. I'm not surprised, but I'm dismayed that we have had, I think, a grand total of 14 comments, and let's say, on being generous, 40 people show up in person of late here to give their input on this. I do find some solace in the statistically valid survey. Now, granted, that was before the draft plan, but it does have very good data that I think the plan is trying to capture. So, anyway, I don't have a comment other than to just say we have discussed this a lot, so maybe that's why there's not a whole lot of comment. I think the comments that were made today from the public are important and valuable.
I think we've all read the plan, I'm thinking. We probably all have had our thoughts. We've had some discussions on it now. We've seen the comments that we've gotten. We've gotten some more comments tonight. May yet get some comments. I'm thinking, our next step is to make a recommendation to the City Council. We already have, from the draft that we have in front of us, several proposed modifications. Sam has gone over all of those. And Lyle's talked about some of those, and Lyle and Mindy have sent us those, the ones that we have in writing. I think what I would suggest is, unless any of us have any comments we think we'd like to make tonight, it might do well for us to take the next couple of weeks and look over those comments and see if there's anything we disagree with or agree with, and then come to the next meeting prepared to make our recommendation to the City Council after we've had some time to look over all of those comments, all of those proposed modifications to the draft plan and see where we go with it.
Well, just confirmation, I know that it was a public, our workshop was public, but was it recorded? Is it going to, their minutes are going to be distributed, or?
It was recorded. The audio is a little quiet, but yeah, we'll have it up. We'll have the minutes available as we do all of our other meetings as they're approved. So yeah, the public is certainly welcome to do that. You know, a couple commissioners that weren't there, we'll get that passed along as well, so that we just completed the minutes today, so we'll share that with everybody. So if you don't feel like you got, even if you were there, shared what you wanted to, don't hesitate to reach out, you know, emails or phone calls to either myself or the consultant, Sam, and, you know, we want to get your ideas and input, and ultimately, whether it's 2 weeks out or a future meeting, we'll make sure you're collectively comfortable and on board with making a recommendation. So yes, that's maybe a longer answer, but yes, the public does have access to that.
And 4 of us had the opportunity to discuss it pretty well yesterday in the work meeting that we had, and you know, I think the couple of you that weren't there should really kind of have the same opportunity to look that over and see if you have any comments or any things that you feel like need to be adjusted in that proposed plan. So, and if you have them now, I think it'd be great for you to voice them. You may need a little bit of time to look it over as well.
Yeah. Actually, that brings up a good point, and following what Josh said about, you know, the dozen or so people that have commented, maybe we can take this time, a few minutes, just to recap what we talked about, at least for the 4 of us that were there yesterday, and the 2. You guys can get up to speed and maybe chime in real quick. Maybe want to take a crack at summarizing what some of the major bullet points that we talked about
from yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, I think Sam did some of that.
Okay.
Sam kind of touched on most of what we talked about yesterday.
Can you bring up, Lau? Can you bring up the? Yeah. Well, actually, the maps that we looked at, which were really relevant. I think there were 2 that called out. What is it? The interchange that's going on in there.
Oh yeah, when we talked about that, and then about the
Josh pointed out
the town center area, what we talked about there.
While we're waiting for Lau to bring it up, Jared, Toby, anything top of mind you can think of?
I need to study it some more.
Okay.
I've been out of town the last week and a half, so I apologize, I'm not up to speed.
While Lyle's bringing that up, I mean, we'll talk about some of the things I think that are a little more visual, but one of the things that we talked a little bit about yesterday was just the designation for, you know, it talks, and Josh did a good job of explaining this. A good part of our plan basically says for a lot of the area of the city, it's pretty well developed, and it's probably going to stay that way, the way it is. But there were, for the housing in particular, there was some discussion about looking at some, we talked about this as well, about whether the word density really ought to figure prominently in there, not just because it's such a hot button word, but that we maybe look at it being more like different housing styles, different modes and styles of housing, and that those ought to, where those ought to go. There is a bit of a reference in the plan talking about that those non-single family, multifamily types of housing styles ought to be located in areas where transportation is more readily available. It kind of says it that way. You know, our current plan talks about it being along the major streets. This one doesn't say it that directly. Maybe it should, I don't know. But we talked about that a little bit as well, which got us into the discussion about an interchange that's proposed or that will be built as part of the West Davis corridor down on Shepherd Lane or near Shepherd Lane, and what that area ought to designate. The plan as it is currently does show something a little bit more, I hesitate to call it higher density, but I guess it is, but of different housing styles that would be encouraged or allowed for there. And I think part of the rationale for that is the proposed interchange that will be located there, because in the body of the discussion earlier, it talks about that those types of housing styles ought to be located where transportation alternatives are more readily available.
And I think I just want to add on to that. We did talk about that, and I think, you know, we'll continue to talk about it, and we'll really, but I think we really want to make sure that before we recommend it to City Council that we nail down that language so that we don't end up with double standards in different areas of town. I don't think that's fair.
Okay. Josh, I think yesterday you had mentioned that you wanted to ask, was it why there were certain things? I'm trying to remember what it was that you had questions about the way that this was written up. Does anybody remember?
If someone can refresh my memory, I would be happy to try to remember, but I can't remember. I do have a question, and I don't know if this is what you were saying. And this is probably to maybe Tim would be the best one of our the consultants who helped out on this to answer. I'm just curious, Lyle, if you could maybe go to the plan that shows transportation element, or even the proposed land use.
Oh, yeah.
Future land use.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know, Quan, if this is what you were thinking, but I would be curious to hear Tim's more professional opinion than our somewhat educated guesses on how the West Davis corridor interchanges, particularly the one at the end of 200 North, how that is anticipated to alleviate, traffic on the eastern side of 200 North, particularly between Flint and Maine, I suppose. If Tim could maybe give us his, take on how he thinks that's going to affect traffic on 200 North, I'd be curious.
Hey, Commissioners. It's good to be with you guys virtually here. So the traffic growth in the future, it looks to really be heavily focused on the west side of 200 North. I'm not sure that I think in general, I would say that providing more connectivity in the network alleviates traffic congestion and just moves all people better, no matter what mode they are on. So I think having more connectivity in the network, having that additional regional north-south link on the West Davis corridor, in general, just kind of moves traffic better. By far, the projected growth in traffic on 200 North is focused on the west side, the western quarter of the city. And so I think without that West Davis corridor in the future, with the growth in West Caysville, it would be a much different picture in terms of what would be happening in the future on that interchange at 200 North and I-15. As it is, adding that link in there, it stays at, it's projected to stay at a pretty, good level through 2040, with not, keeping the current capacity. So I don't know if that helps answer your question. I think you were talking about more about Flint. And, those people, they'll continue to use I-15 more than likely, but they have another link. There's more connectivity in the system. Overall, the way it's projected is that, level of service at a high level, which is, the general plan, we like to keep things at a relatively high level. This isn't, a transportation master plan or a specific traffic study. So, at a level of service, D or so, in terms of the amount of delay you're having. I think it's looking to be, at or maybe slightly above capacity for the far west end, but at that eastern part of 200 North, west of the freeway, it's staying at a pretty good level of service, at a high level at least. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps.
I just have a question related to Main Street, the comments about the slowing of Main Street. My understanding was that it was just going to be north of 200 North, that change would be. Yep. Is that correct?
Yep. That's true.
Which you mean that cross section for the road, or?
Yeah.
I think so.
We could change the street so it'd be slower from Main Street north of 200 North. I guess Lyle, maybe just clarification on that. Is the reason we're proposing that is so that we can try to force traffic maybe like to Fairfield? Is that, I mean, for people going to Layton? What's the thoughts behind that?
Tim, are you eager to talk to that, or you want me to take a stab at it?
Take a stab at it. I can chime in.
Yeah, I think, from what I recall, I think it was just to show, I mean,
It's to enhance the
Yeah.
character of
Right.
the neighborhood with the transportation, also providing some alternative transportation capability.
I mean, it wasn't anything set in stone.
I don't know that it was really intended to divert traffic from
No.
Maine, but more
I mean,
to
the
just
reason
enhance it.
I'm concerned about that maybe is because living in that kind of like on the Mutton Hollow area, I mean, typically what you see is like if there's any type of accident on I-15, everyone goes to the surface streets.
Yeah.
Right.
And Main Street becomes a nightmare.
Yeah.
And, you know,
It's true.
because everyone's trying to get into Layton from using Main Street.
Right.
And so if you slow the traffic, that's just even going to snarl it even worse. And so that would just be one consideration is that, you know, is that really what we want? That'd be kind of an unintended consequence
Right.
of, you know, making the change.
Well, it also depends.
I think, I mean, I can talk a little bit to the way we're thinking about Main Street. You know, I had said this in the meeting with the advisory group a few days ago, but we sort of think about it in terms of three segments. The southern segment, which is, you know, the link between 89 and I-15, essentially into, you know, the historic part of Kaysville. That's, you know, a state route. It's SR 273. It's, you know, I think going to kind of keep its function right now, and needs to continue to move a lot of cars, people, transit, et cetera, freight. And then you get into the historic part, and you know, we're actually working with between Kaysville and UDOT Region 1 on a specific kind of solution that implements that 2019 vision, as well as, you know, works with what UDOT needs on that state route. That would keep the capacity of the road, keep traffic moving, reduce conflicts, but slow it down, try to create a more walkable downtown. So that's the historic piece. And then the piece north of 200 North, the treatment of that and the kind of like the vision for that is largely in response to the Kaysville City Center plan. It's almost like wait and see how that Kaysville City Center develops and kind of transforms. If it does, you know, maybe that main segment of Main Street could transform as well. It's not quite as important a regional link as the other pieces of Main Street. It's not a state route. It's, you know, so maybe creating more links across it from the neighborhood into that Kaysville City Center area, slowing traffic, maybe prioritizing more for transit. So that's the thought there with the different segments of Main Street.
Going back to what you said, Toby, about if there's an accident on I-15, I think the other thing that we also have to take into consideration, you know, let's say once Western Corridor opens up, is you got to look at technology and Google Maps and Waze where it's going to route traffic. It may just route traffic down some small street that, you know, again, you know, we have no control over. So that's the other part of it too.
So we did have quite a bit of discussion about the area north of 200 North and east of I-15. And really felt like that ought to be, Sam mentioned that it ought to probably be not quite as specific as it seems to indicate, both on the street network and on the land uses there. We felt like that ought to be probably a little more general in terms of just designating the area for future mixed use, commercial use, residential use.
Well, can you
maybe
highlight
all
that area
mixed,
real quick?
But not be very specific about exactly where that would all delineate. Because it would kind of depend on developers and what really makes sense there economically. We also talked about the Market and Borough Street area, really kind of thinking that area isn't going to change anytime soon. And, you know, probably just ought to maintain its character and be designated that way, which is, I don't know exactly what to designate it. We talked about it maybe being like light industrial, or light industrial commercial, something like that, because that's really what it is. It's kind of a mix of those kinds of uses. And it doesn't really seem like that's going to change anytime in the near future.
Do you need, I guess one question I have had is, I mean, I like the concept, and it seems like, you know, with the footbridge across I-15, and is that the thought that we needed to have like the mixed use there to justify having a footbridge?
Well, partly, yeah, certainly that, and to connect the neighborhoods to the east. Because that actually makes a pretty good connection over to Barnes Park without having to get in a car and drive over there.
I mean, I think, again, I would just say both to those on the commission who weren't there yesterday and anyone any of the citizens who are interested, go listen if you can to our discussion yesterday, because we touched on almost every comment that was made from the public, and then a lot of the comments that are made here. We fleshed that out over 2 hours. So I think it was a valuable discussion. But my recollection was, I think we were all in agreement that yes, that that trail connection, whatever it's going to look like, I'll be very curious to find that out as we go through the years. But the trail connection across I-15 up into Main Street, where Mutton Hollow is, whatever, was I think a good ideal to plan for. But I don't know that we were saying it had to be mixed use or it had to be some sort of use. That trail, it could be of total light industrial or commercial use that comes into that property in the future, and the trail could just hug the north side. So I think the trail can go in no matter what the use comes in as, but the connection can be there regardless.
I was taking a look at the notes, and I thought the idea for the connection across Center Street was really interesting, because I think those things aren't cheap, but if that is a priority for the city to make that connection, from Old Mill Lane to Center Street, over or under I-15, really interesting idea, and you could put that on the plan as well. But where did that come from? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I mean, I don't know if I brought it up, but I think I made some comments on it. I mean, I think before I-15 came in, obviously that was one of the logical connections. And, if UDOT could buy off on it, it seems like a below grade connection would be the most logical. I don't know cost-wise if it's more or less, but that would facilitate, instead of saying, look, because we addressed, for example, a comment that Zane Larson made today about maximizing the automobile efficiency on 200 North and not sacrificing any multimodal use on 200 North. And so we said, but there still should be connections, maybe not on 200 North. So where else would they be? Burton Lane, Shepherd. But this connection on Center Street was the closest to facilitate the goal of creating multimodal connection from east to west, but not going under the freeway on 200 North. And so that was, I think, the genesis of at least some of the discussion we had.
Yep, that's true.
Great, thanks. While I'm at it asking questions, I was also interested in hear about there was a note that the Parkway Street that we had put in there, have a paralleling Main Street, was a stretch for Caysville. I definitely like to hear about the concern about that.
I think Wilf kind of already addressed it.
Sort of, yeah, but I mean, you probably described it the best yesterday, and when you talked about the theoretical.
Right. I mean, my thought was, and I just sort of full disclosure. On one hand, I was very pleased to know that we were going to have Landmark Design be our consultant, because I think, Sam could correct me if I'm wrong, they are based in landscape architecture largely. At least that informs a lot of their methods, maybe. And I have a degree in landscape architecture. I'm a licensed landscape architect. I don't practice anymore. And when we talk in the abstract or in an academic level, I love the idea of that Parkway Street sort of cutting through where Market and Borough Streets are. I think that's a great idea in the abstract. My comment was, and this is, I think, why Wilf was saying the land use pattern of Market and Burrows Street isn't going to change. So that is a great idea in the abstract, but it's not going to happen in the next even 50 years or longer. And so it just didn't to me, it wasn't a very practical idea. And I felt like we needed to blend the academic a little more with the practical. And that's where I think we were also saying the level of detail in that area got too detailed, and we needed to scale that back. I think that was my comment. Is that what you guys remember? Yeah.
Yep.
I think that makes sense to me as well, because I mean, like you said, there's so many established businesses there, I don't see them moving, you know, and as long as we feel like we can have a trail, I think that's the main thing I like is the trail over the I-15. And so as long as we feel like we can still have that be feasible to have the trail without having to have the other multi-use in the Market Street Borough area, then I think that would be the best case.
So there was discussion of removing these green lines. Having said that, I think we had also agreed to keep it there just as a point of discussion, knowing that that's just something for people to think about. Because again, this plan is a kind of a direct reflection of what the survey, what people want. It may not exactly be in that general area that they want, but I think it's good just to leave it there for discussion, for future discussion, and like you said, difference between academic versus reality and pragmatic.
I think just to talk a little bit about where that concept came from was I think in a lot of ways it was a response to if that area does transform into something more residential, something more mixed use, away from the current use. I think, like you're saying, like if that area retains its current uses, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and certainly would rely on large scale redevelopment. So some of it was basically if there is more residential there, to ensure that there are walkable streets, so that you could have that from a transportation standpoint, have that focus on walkability and being able to choose more of what mode you want to take as a place in Caysville. To do that near the Main Street corridor, near downtown, near I-15, in those major transportation corridors. So to have that more walkable corridor, it doesn't have to necessarily be a parkway, with that park element, but that was just the idea, is to have a street kind of at the core of that district that would be walkable. If the area doesn't transform, then certainly it doesn't make as much sense.
Yeah, and again, I agree with the concept. I think my comment yesterday in our meeting was, the only way that it would happen is I use the analogy of Daybreak, right, where Kennecott had a blank canvas and they could create those wonderful, walkable, connected communities, whatever. If we could get one landowner to buy all that up and create that, I'm all in favor of it. I don't think it's as likely to happen. And therefore, we have to plan within the practical constraints of the area, I guess was my point.
One other thing I think maybe for Toby and Jared and Steve, certainly when he listens to this, to consider is when we did talk about the different housing styles, the more intense housing styles or varied housing styles and the areas, and if it is to be focused more where there is more transportation option available, what that really says about the city is that then the places for that are very likely going to be mostly north of 200 North in that city center area and in that area to the west of I-15, but close to 200 North, perhaps down along Main Street, even a little further south on Main Street. We talked a little bit about the Utah State Orchard property, a vacant piece right on Main Street, has good transportation, good transit, some of the best transit that we've got in the city. That might be a good location. And then, of course, we also talked about the interchanges with the West Davis corridor and what might happen there. Those will likely be the places where the different housing styles might be most likely. And so that's kind of the picture that paints if that's what we intend.
I think that makes sense to me. I mean, I've always just been kind of under the impression that under the opinion, I would just say, of just we needed to just, put more on the west where it makes sense. And so I think where we've designated it makes sense. I think the thing we want to try to stay ahead of is on the West Davis corridor. I mean, because we're going to lose our opportunity to have any, diversity in housing if we don't do something soon.
Yeah.
We might have already missed the opportunity. Really.
That's very true.
Yeah, I mean, what could we do? Right? I mean, realistically.
Yeah.
The only thing that I see is, so let's jump 5-10 years ahead or whatever, however many years where that west corridor comes in, and fast forward where those neighbors around that interchange, sick and tired of that high traffic, they move, and then, or a couple of them move, and again, possibility if a developer comes in and says, okay, I'll buy out this land, I'm gonna try to get rezoned, turn into whatever it is. I think that's the only option that I could see, but I mean, right now, like, what could we do?
There's not a lot. I mean,
No.
there is some vacant land
Yeah.
there, but not a lot. And even less on the north interchange.
Right. And right now, they are zoned the southwest. What's that zoned, Lyle? That where the
So this area near the southern West Davis corridor
Yeah.
interchange is either all developed or it's sewer district property. It's an A5 heavy agriculture. Speaking with the district as part of this process, they have indicated that perhaps someday they may not use all the land for that, and so that's what's shown here is near an interchange, maybe some potential for some commercial type uses near that. Most of the vacant ground near this is actually further north, closer to Angel Street, here in this area, but there are some acreage available to develop.
there you go.
And some potential if things change and how the sewer district's using things.
One thing that we talked about yesterday that I think my guess is Sam would probably echo. The reason why this plan is showing the way it is, namely, all that yellow is intended to be single-family residential, and all of the proposed or future non-single-family residential, I'll call it, because it encompasses a lot of things, is up near the city center, as we're calling it. And the reason for that, again, this is where I think Sam would have to confirm what I'm saying. The reason for that is probably the strongest message that came out of the statistically valid survey, which if you saw the map, it was very evenly distributed of information input from citizens across the span of the city. One of the strongest messages was that's where the growth and the change or the variety of housing should go. And so there's the shotgun pattern of all the input from citizens right there, that map. That's a big change from what's been expected and what's been on the plan for the last several years or decades even. That's a big change, because what it currently says before this gets adopted is that, for example, housing varieties or the D word, density, should be spread throughout the city. That's been the expectation of both the commission, the council, and the citizens for years. And the statistically valid survey, in other words, this plan is responding to citizen input that says we don't necessarily want it spread throughout the city.
Right.
That's how I interpret it. Now, again, you can debate that, and that's a hot button issue, but this plan is just responding to citizen input spread through the whole city. So, yeah, there's going to be strong opinions about that, no doubt, but I think that's an important thing to recognize.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just gonna point this out, so, like, 3/4 of that land where the high density is like, people want it, is commercial industrial. What we're all saying is, it's not in my backyard, and that's why we're all pointing to that portion of the city, because we're saying, nobody lives in that portion of the city. That's all industrial.
Yep.
I mean, is that not?
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair to say.
Well, my question, I mean, I saw the statistically valid survey. I feel like we're lumping the D word, density, into the other D word, development, that was used. I assumed, and I assumed that a lot of people assumed as they were reading that, unless it specifically said density housing, I thought it just said development, which in my mind is commercial. So I'm wondering if the assumptions we're making based on that survey are for housing, or, and maybe I'm totally off base, I don't remember exactly, it's been a while, but were people saying we should put housing there, or were they saying we should put development there, which has, I think, different meanings to different people?
Sam, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, so they were first asked where would we like to see development occur.
Oh, okay.
And then within that area, if development were to occur, and they were asked this for every single area
Okay.
that was offered to them. If development were to occur in this area, what would you like to see?
Oh, okay.
And that's where we got the
Right,
mixed
this
use
one.
for areas A and B,
Oh, okay.
being areas that are the city center. Whereas if you go forward, Lyle, to the, past this one, West Caysville development, areas for single family homes, 59%. So, so everything that we built in the concept, Josh has already pointed out, was very much responsive
Okay.
to all of these questions.
Okay, good. Thanks for clarifying that. I'm glad that we had the answer to that one, because it just came to me and wanted to make sure I knew what we were doing.
And maybe just one comment, going back to what Josh was talking about. I mean, there might have been a comment in the prior general plan that diverse density should be spread throughout the city, but you can look at the heat map, and that was not followed. So, I mean, in practice, that was not followed in the past. So, I mean, I think that this would be just a continuation of the way it's been.
I guess my response to that would be the heat map was not based on statistically valid information. The heat map was generated by the 32 quote unquote people who come to a public
No, I'm talking
open
about,
house.
I'm talking about a
The
heat map of the
development heat map.
population density.
Yeah. That
Okay.
other heat map.
So, yeah, I guess clarify because I don't understand. Maybe I'm the only one. I don't know.
I'm just saying that.
Do you know which one he's talking about, Lyle, the heat map?
I'll pull it up. So it essentially is something we put together for the commission. It's been some time ago, but it reflects existing densities and its distribution throughout the city. And it shows the hot pockets essentially run by all.
So I guess what you're saying, Toby, is that the heat map showing where density is where this plan is saying it needs to go more.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so I guess maybe I'm curious to hear what the rest of the commission thinks. And Lyle, can you go back to that, the dot map of the opinions from the survey? So I guess if I were on the city council, who I think is going to be the one, they're going to be the ones adopting this. And I'm tasked with, my constituency is the entirety of Caysville. And I see, all of the blue people, the blue dots, if they're the ones saying, we don't want, we want single family in our backyard. But the green dots, the orange dots, and the, maroon dots, all weighed in on the statistically valid survey too. 59% of them, of all those dots, said they want single family in West Caysville. I think that's what it says. And maybe we're not here to, I guess, debate the results of the survey. I think my comment, I guess, then would be to the council. you should be, of all this massive fire hose of information, in my opinion, you need to look at the results from that survey, because that's the broadest swath of opinions from the citizens of Caysville. And our consultants tried their best to reflect those opinions in this plan, but ultimately the council needs to say, does this plan reflect those opinions? And if it does, if it doesn't, maybe it needs to be changed or whatever. But so I had a question that I was going to propose, but it got lost in the translation. So.
Was this survey only done via internet? The reason I'm asking that is because I live in an area with a lot of older people that have no idea how to even do a survey.
Yep.
That most likely didn't take this survey that we're missing out on. And I understand you can't reach everyone, but there's a lot of people on West Caysville that fill out the survey because they're probably a lot more technology savvy than their younger generation.
I think the answer is it was not just internet, but Lyle, will you tell us how the survey was created in a statistically valid way?
Yeah, and just one quick interjection of if the chair and the audience will just always make sure we're speaking at the mic. So I'll
Thanks for the
empower him
reminder.
to let you come up just so we get it on record. But the survey conducted through Y2 Analytics, and I'm not an expert on the statistically valid methods, but in order to ensure they caught different demographics, socioeconomic classes, age ranges, and so forth. They did do mailers, they did do online methodologies to collect the data. The people who were selected to participate, so it wasn't just random people that got to do it. They used data that they have access to as to outreach to make sure they got different addresses, different parts of the city, and to collect data from, again, not just north, south, east, and west, but all of those spectrums to get a broad representation of our population. I don't know specifically how many of what age groups were given, but they actually may have that if that's of consideration for the council.
And we have the sticker boards.
Yeah. And so I guess the thing I would add, because I think, Mr. Dancy makes a great point. My interpretation is if that were the case, to his concern, it would not be statistically valid. It would only be getting information from one cohort, namely the people who know how to take an internet survey. They have internet, they're savvy enough to do it. That's not statistically valid. The statistically valid survey, I think that's a term of art. Like you could even Google statistically valid survey. It'll tell you what it has to look like in order to be statistically valid. It encompasses more than just a certain demographic. So I think that's a good point, and I think, at least to my understanding, is it got broader than just the people who would take it online or whatever.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct, and that was something that we were concerned with. And so initially there was a study done, but we kind of were picking it apart, asking what you're asking, how did you get the numbers, et cetera. And I believe Toby, probably the most qualified here dealing with statistics, that's your job. You had asked, there were certain criterias with the definition of statistically correct. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the results, it was a random survey from the different areas, and you can't tell any difference between the areas and how they answered. So I believe that we can believe the results and interpret the results based on that generally the public wanted what they said, in the results. So I think for me, I'm perfectly fine with the way we have it right now. Like with the picture that's up on the screen right now, if we can get development in areas A and B, that will be ideal. My concern would be that we put this out here, and that this is kind of the concept, but that we will not have it in practice be that there will be redevelopment in both areas, and it will just be an A and not B. That would be my concern.
If the commission's ready, you can continue your discussion.
Yeah.
I think one item of interest for the consultant team and myself would be, and a comment to go with that, landmark design is likely not going to completely update every comment and every item of input at this stage, just for efficiency's sake of not changing the plan time and time again as it goes between the commission and the council and so forth until it's ready. But if there are very specific sections or things that you need to see, and language, the images, graphs, maps, or whatever, that maybe you could give some direction on as to, before we meet again, here are the things we probably do need to see specifically in order to feel comfortable with the recommendation, or what kind of assurances do you need? It sounds like next time is when you're going to be more ready to say, yeah, we like this input, or we don't like that input, or agree with it, whatever it might be. But any direction you might have for that, I think, would be helpful for us this evening.
So I think that in the interest of time, obviously we did spend a couple hours the other day talking about this. If you could, Lyle, just do a quick summary for the other commissioners, or actually just for the whole entire commission, so that way we can, the others can take a look at what we had actually flushed out.
Sorry. I'm half distracted reading a data survey, so do you want me to forward the commentary from the last meeting? Was that the question?
Please, yeah.
I'd be happy to share that with the entire commission.
Okay.
Yeah. So my concern, I don't know if it's a concern, but just my comment would be that if we're going to leave the draft plan the way it is, and that's going to go to the council, and then they'll be told about the other things that we talked about.
I see where you're going with that. Yeah.
That's fine, I guess, as long as the point is made to the council that we talked about these things, and here are some of the things that we thought ought to be changed or ought to be considered to be changed. Like we just talked about with the area north of 200 North and east of I-15. We talked about some pretty considerable change to that part of the plan. If the council takes a look at this and they say, oh, this is what the plan shows, and then we just tell them this is what the Planning Commission said, I'm not sure they get the full impact of what we were trying to convey. That would be my concern. I think it would take a Lyle or a Sam or somebody at the meeting to really make a point, to say, listen, this is what the Planning Commission thought about that area. And do you agree, or do you think it ought to be changed according to what the Planning Commission was saying?
And we could rely on Tammy and Mike, who were there along the way, to remind the rest of the council what was talked about.
That's right. We do have, and they're here again. Which is,
not that I don't trust politicians, but Lyle, you said that Landmark wasn't. So at what point can we have Landmark make the changes that we called out the other day? Because I think we had also talked about this in the past, which was the general plan comes from the Planning Commission,
it is
and it's our product to hand over to the City Council, and then it's up to them to flush out the details. So I want to make sure that whatever points that we have made comes out. I don't want to rely on anybody whatsoever. No offense to anybody, whether you're there, I'm there. I just want to make sure that it's represented. So at what point could we ask Landmark to make those changes?
I think it'd be appropriate to do it now if that's the sense of, we want to see it. It may take us, and I'll maybe let Sam speak to this and his team, more than 2 weeks to put them together.
Okay.
But if that's the appropriate direction, we can forward that to the council. Here's where we're at with the process. We've got the liaisons here knowing it. But I don't see why that's inappropriate. If you do feel comfortable seeing maybe just certain pieces of it, we could do that. Or doesn't sound like it if you felt comfortable with the general comments.
I actually think that's better, because then
it's
the
a complete
council
product.
gets the true sense of what is the recommendation of the Planning Commission. And here it is. It's right there in front of you. And it can certainly be talked about why those recommendations were made and why the modifications were made from maybe what was in the original draft, but at least they have it in front of them and saying, this is the Planning Commission's recommendation. They can change it if they want to.
Looking over at the consultant, what I think would be appropriate is we'll begin implementing certain changes I think we got some consensus on. Sounds like there's going to be more consensus made by the next meeting, though, so some changes will take place even after that. And that's going to change the recent timetable we talked about, without a doubt, but that there's no legal means or necessity that it be what we've laid out, other than we'll just string Sam along a little bit more and keep him busy. So I'll work those details out with him, and it sounds like that's the direction that the commission's interested in.
And, and that's always a concern. You don't want to lose momentum in something like this and when it gets dragged out. But by the same consideration, I had a discussion with one of our illustrious council members last night saying we really ought to get this right. We ought to take the time and really go through it and make sure it says what we want it to say rather than try to get it done quickly. So,
and I agree with that because during some of our meetings that come up, we ask each other, what is it that we're going off of? And the general plan is usually what we go off of. So let's make sure that we do it right. And we also present whoever that next, generation of planning commissioners are.
What we'll attempt to do is, hopefully I'm not overcommitting the support staff and the consultants, but it sounds like there's some very specific maps that we've looked at and some ideas on how to maybe finesse those to work with the comments. By and large, the bulk of it, I'm not hearing change page 72 and 89. We're looking at very concentrated sections that we can bring before you, some draft language or updated images to look at next time, in addition to looking at the broader comments that you'll give us next time. We'll see what the direction is at that point.
And then we also, I guess it was one of the suggestions, I believe it was from Mike, from one of the other committees, to get the executive summary up front, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Basically,
Because
it made sense.
Section 6 and put it more up front. And that actually was a suggestion that came from Councilmember Blackham, which was, I think, a really good one.
Can I make one more useless comment?
Sure.
But you got to come to the mic.
So, once again, useless comment. But when we say city center, you guys are referring to north of 200 North, right? When you hear city center, what do you naturally think of?
South of 200.
Where we're at right now,
Yeah,
this is the
and it's
city center.
included in it. That's included in it.
So, but if the bulk of what you're talking about is city center, maybe it needs the terminology of North City Center or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's not a bad
So that you don't
idea.
get fools like myself here worried you're gonna build high-density housing in my neighborhood.
That's true. Thank you. See, not worthless.
Yeah.
One thing I'll say to maybe alleviate Mr. Dancy and his neighbor's concern is, if this plan were adopted, if I understood where you live, in theory, if this plan were adopted as is and it were followed, those two, the second one's the important one, you should have single family all around you.
That's what the plan is now for here every month anyway.
Well, no. Well, and I guess what I would say is the plan now says a mix of density could be throughout the city, which is like very ambiguous, and it's like, hey, maybe that is in Rob's backyard. This says it's not in Rob's backyard, it's somewhere else.
I just want to make sure it stays single family, because Steve was talking about the changes they want to make to it, the single family to be a more broad term, to have more multifamily units within single family.
I think what we were saying there is single family can look a lot of different ways.
Right.
It's still single family. That's my understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, single family can look different.
Well, I think with
It can
all
be
those
small lot, big lot,
discussions
whatever.
being made, I think that just highlights the point that we need to make sure we get the language down so that there's not
Right.
a lot of ambiguity.
Yeah.
To the point Toby made too, so things are applied evenly.
Okay, so let's move things along. It's about 8:50 right now. So next step is...
Sounds like the commission's essentially tabling it, not making any decisions tonight, and we'll come back in a couple weeks with hopefully some more information.
Do we need a
based on your
motion to
comments.
table it, or?
Yeah, I
I think
was
we
going to say, I'll
appropriate-
make a motion that we table the adoption of the general plan this evening to allow for staff and the consultant to make the modifications to the draft plan as we have discussed this evening. For our review then at a future meeting. I don't know if that would be 2 weeks, or it may take you longer than that, or however long it takes you.
Open is appreciated. We'll work fast.
We have a second?
A second.
Okay, so voting starts. Wolf, with you?
Aye.
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 Okay, great. Moving on to the next and last, well, actually, no, the next item is number 8, public hearing for amendment to various chapters of Title 18, building regulations, and Title 19, subdivisions of the Kaysville City Ordinance, updating storm water requirement.
So Josh Belknap is here this evening. He's the Public Works Director, if you haven't met him before. And just a very, very short explanation, and maybe I'll even try to take this, Josh, before you have to get into details. But anytime an ordinance comes through that deals with development, land use, it's got to come through public hearing through the Planning Commission before it goes to council. This one's very technical in nature, is the construction standards and how things are done. And Mr. Belknap can speak much more to that than I can. The short and sweet, then I'll turn it over, is this deals with stormwater and essentially making sure it's clean before it enters our system, and some of the things that developers would have to consider as they do new construction.
Yeah, thank you, Lyle, and thank you, commissioners. As Lyle very well pointed out, what we're bringing to you today is some modifications to Title 18 and 19 portions of those titles having to do with stormwater. The EPA in 2016 enacted requirements for what's called low impact development, which is essentially, as Lyle stated, concerns about water quality from stormwater runoff. The general function of stormwater is let's capture it, let's convey it, and let's get it out to the west side of Wasatch Front communities. What the EPA requirements are essentially is capture that on-site, retain the 80th percentile of each storm without it ever being able to leave the site. Anything over that can then enter the conveyance system and head west. This is something that we've been working on, and that the state has pushed the deadline further and further with a lot of ambiguity and confusion about some of the requirements and how to feasibly enact the requirements of low impact development. In addition to adopting ordinance changes, kind of formalizing things in terms of low impact development, we've also worked closely with engineering consultants, staff, and several others in developing a kind of a guidebook, a manual that we would be adopting as well by reference. It'd be a standalone document that further assists navigating what can be kind of a confusing process for developers and individuals who haven't dealt with LID. And then the final thing that we have is last year we brought before Planning Commission an update to our 1994 construction standards that we've been working for about 3.5, 4 years on. We're now bringing with that the standard drawing details. So it's 16 or 17 pages of little details of the construction standard text says this, and we're just illustrating what that is. Yeah, you can see an example there on the screen, one of the detail pages. So going through and drawing these out, getting all the notes put together, some of the support documentation. So this is another item that we'd be wanting to adopt in conjunction with our previously adopted construction standards. So,
yeah. Just with that, we're looking for a recommendation from the commission this evening to pass along to the city council. If you have questions on the details or specifics of it, hopefully between Mr. Belknap here and I, we can answer those for you. And then as a reminder, it is a required public hearing to make sure you open that as well.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions for Josh before we open it up?
I may make one comment for the commission and the public to consider before the hearing. For me, the layman on this, again, there are multiple ways to do it, but by and large, what it means is what can't be retained on site to just percolate into the groundwater, which will naturally filtrate as it goes through soils and enters the groundwater system. Anything beyond that would go through a filter of some sort before it hits the gutter or in the boxes and then the pipe. there are lots of options for developers to choose from the way we put together this packet, so they don't have to do it just one way. They can decide what works best for the site. Likely, it's going to go through a landscape area of some sort to clean it, and then it will enter the pipe. So that's a lot of what this requirement's going to do is keep our water clean before it enters the pipes and hits the lake.
Okay. All right. Again, commissioners, before I open it up, public comments. Anybody out there want to make any public comments regarding this?
If I'm here, I'm
Hey, why not?
I don't know if it's appropriate, but after you're done with this item, I would actually like to make a comment to the commission if they'd like, for, something maybe I'd like to get on the agenda later.
Yep. Yeah, that'll be,
Call to the public.
yeah, call the public. Yep. Yep. Okay, so with that, we're going to close that up. Again, back to the commission.
So, Lyle, are we ready? I mean, can we make a recommendation on this tonight?
Yeah, as staff, we're as comfortable as we're going to get with it. It's not something we love, but when the federal government says do it and the state government says cities take care of it, then I think we've got it to a point where we're prepared to move it along if the commission is, you're welcome to recommend it to the council.
And we've met our requirement here for the public hearing?
We have met our requirements.
With this, okay. Then I would make a motion that we recommend to the city council the adoption of the amendments to various chapters of Title 18 of the building regulations and Title 19 subdivisions of the Kaysville City ordinances to update the stormwater requirements as presented.
I'll second it.
Starting off with Josh.
Aye.
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 Okay. All right, so then with that, we're going to go to item number 9, reports and correspondences.
Whoops. Cheated your agenda and made you think it's shorter than it's going to be. If you would like to do a call to the public,
Actually.
this would be a good time to do it, or I'm welcome to give the reports as well right now. But
Okay.
sorry, I didn't mean to get you excited about being done.
Thank you. Again, my name is Zane Larson. I live at 44 North, 400 West. This is an item I've spoken with Josh and Lyle before. My process I'd like to start is a discussion and hopefully a change to to the Kaysville City accessory building ordinance. Currently, as it states, if you can have an accessory building as long as that single structure doesn't exceed 10% of the square footage of one's property minus the square footage of the home, and total accessory buildings can't exceed 20%. So my issue is that 10% is that, it's like if we take my property, for example, I don't know if you want to pull up Google Maps, Lyle, or whatever. Or you can pull up the ordinance. This is, if you want to write it down, I don't know, it just says 17-2-2 for definitions. I printed out from the website, and Lyle says that my copy is a little out of date. I did get it from the website because it still mentions 3,000 square feet, but there's that one. So yeah, I'm referring mostly to item 5. Accessory buildings in any zone shall not occupy more than 20% lot area footprint of the main building, less of the footprint of the main building, and no single structure more than 10%. So again, my issue is at 10%. So for example, my area, my home at 44 North, there we are. Yeah, so I have a really long, deep driveway. I call it my airport. And I have a garage in the back, and I have about 20 feet behind the garage, and I want to add on to the garage, maybe put a shop back there. I'm in Old Town Kaysville. There's lots of trees, and it's really, you can't even see back there. Even my neighbors, their house can't even see back there. I'm just trying to make good use of my property. The problem is if I add just that part behind there, I'm exceeding that 10%. For my lot, an example, is total square footage is about 13,700 square feet. And so my approximate 20%, or say 10%, would be around 1,300 square feet. But my 20% would be around 2,600 square feet. So I could, and the city doesn't require a building permit for any structures 200 square feet or less. So for example, I could build almost 13 sheds in my backyard, 2,200 square feet or less, and that's fine. But if I want to build a single 2,000 square foot structure, ordinance just doesn't allow that. And so that doesn't make sense, because I could do whatever I want. I could speckle them through there and little anthills of 200 square foot sheds, and that's stupid. And my neighbors would think it's stupid, and the person would be stupid. But so what I'm wanting is to be able to change that, get rid of that 10%. I have talked to a couple council members, and one of the consensus was that we don't want to leave it up to be just up to discretion of city council. We want to have it defined. And I personally am in the process of trying to find cities in the around here in northern Utah that have good accessory buildings as an example. I apologize, I don't have anything to bring to you yet. I haven't had time to dig through it all. Because one of the things that was brought up was like, well, maybe we can leave it as, here's these general rules, but leave it up to the decision of city council if it makes sense. Another, like Josh brought up, well, I could see it being not good, because then you're a government of men, not of law, to make it hard and fast. The problem with that, though, is that even in my own neighborhood, a lot of that doesn't even fit, because I don't know if it's plans that haven't been followed, but in Old Town Caysville, you got large lots, large deep lots, but then right next to it, granted not in Old Town Caysville, right next to it are other lots that they've put 3 houses in the same spot a single house right next door is. And so it doesn't even fit in that, where I just want to build a larger structure in the back and not a whole bunch of small sheds. That's mainly the point. Just that 10%, I don't see what is the ordinance trying to protect against, because you're still limited on height, on size, distances from property lines. You're still limited on the 20% that you can have in your backyard. But the 10% is single structure, because like what I want to build, as the ordinances are written, I can literally build exactly what I want to build, as long as I don't attach it to the existing garage. So I could put it off by 1 foot. So the exact same appearance would still be there. It wouldn't save anything. It would just cost me 40% more, and I would get less for it. For what? And that's my point. So I would be happy to come back and have more presentation and more examples of other cities that hopefully have maybe, hey, here's some ideas that they've done that we could think of too.
Yeah. No, I would actually encourage you to come back, and because we have had situations before where just the way that it was written, we couldn't approve a plan, but after a while we did, with some research, we were able to change the, so.
Yeah, and even the 20% rule can not even fit very well in itself, because I've got a third of an acre almost, and 20% at the moment, that's almost like I said, 2,600 square feet. But some of the houses that's built just a couple blocks from me, I have more property in the front of my house than they have their entire lot, or grass. I have more grass in the front of my house than they have their entire lot. Yep. And so they couldn't even build a tool shed. They put a closet outside. And so even for them, that doesn't make sense, because if they were to build something a little bit larger, what are they losing? Another 100 square feet of their 500 square feet of grass?
Yep.
And hey, I would be removing some grass that I water so I can come out and mow it next week. And in our droughts, that's a good thing, right? To remove it. Anyway, thank you. So I can maybe talk to you after the meeting or talk to Lyle.
Lyle, yep, definitely.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. But just a quick question to you, Lyle. With those percentages, I'm trying to remember why they were so specific, because I thought that we also discussed that and trying to avoid that because of this reason, unintended consequences. So I'm curious.
Yeah, these have been around for a very long time, so I can't tell you where
Who to
they're
blame?
derived from exactly.
Yeah.
I assume just generally speaking, they're trying to limit the scale
Right.
and size and potential imposing structures that would theoretically be built right in the middle of a block in someone's backyard. So generally, when you have a percentage, it is arbitrary. You got to draw the line in the sand somewhere. Why they chose those, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do see examples where people build multiple buildings rather than one building. Probably more often than not, that's to skirt building code. If they get under 200 square feet, they don't have to go through some of the requirements that we look at when we bring inspectors out. And so there's just some cost savings that they believe can come with that. But anyway, there may be other reasons why people are doing multiple rather than just one. And my direction and question to Mr. Larson was, we can change the ordinance. It would be a very easy change text-wise just to say get rid of the 10%. But I don't know if there's interest from commission and council to entertain that. So I encourage them to chat with those who vote on the laws to see if it does merit the time to change. And is there more to it than just the 10% that ought to be considered?
Has this problem cropped up? Have you had this problem come up?
It does. I don't know if it's too often,
Yeah.
but Dan perhaps could speak to it more than I can on if the 10% often becomes an imposition.
It does. It limits people quite a bit, and a lot of lots do have a lot of room to
They've got space.
do better. And it's like he says, you can still skirt it if you. You get a lot worse product skirting it when you'd have a lot better product if we would let them do it.
Yeah.
They can't apply for a variance if we.
Yeah.
Because the variance rule don't even apply to that because it's an accessory building. So, I think it would be something to look into.
Okay.
Yeah. You'd be surprised how many people want big toy sheds or workshops or garages. So yeah, we will see it. But again, the opposite side of that is that appropriate to allow them to do that? And that's where we're interested in your take on, do we pursue this or not?
One concern was brought up by a council member to me I talked to, it was Blackham at the time, is that, we don't want them to ruin the neighborhood and, just build whatever. And my point was they still have to submit a building permit, which has to be approved.
True.
Yep. And I think even in there's that process, if someone's building a building permit, neighbors can complain against
Agreed.
it. So, the city still has the final say.
Yeah.
It just allows, property owners to be able to use their property a little better.
Agreed.
Efficiently.
No, I agree. There's always checks and balances, and we've always, well, I shouldn't say we, but I think the consensus on one hand is allowing property owners to exercise the right to do whatever they wish within reasonable limits. I know Josh is going to come back at me on that one, so I'll qualify that within reasonable limits. And again, that's why we're here, is to, just like Mr. Larson said, to make sure that we do a final check on it. So, again, I'm trying to think back at that one scenario where somebody was making an addition, couldn't do it because of a setback rule. We tabled it, and then we eventually changed based on that. So I think we should be able to do that here too. I don't see any reason with it, and it sounds like there's a lot of demand for it. So that's my opinion, and
I'd like to see, how many other communities have a similar kind of rule. My guess is not a lot.
Yeah.
But that would be interesting to see.
Yeah. And I guess I'm surprised by the numbers too, considering that I'm assuming that, like you said, Lau, it's been here for quite some time. And I could see that right now where we don't have a lot of property, but Mr. Larson's property is pretty old, so that really is restrictive. But then was that the mindset of, let's say, whatever, decades ago when lot or house square footage sizes were a lot smaller than they have become in the past couple of decades, with the McMansions or not?
Yeah, it would just be speculating a little bit on that. I would say generally that, again, there are ways to skirt it, but if you think of maybe a Costco or a big box store, I mean, there is something to be said about just the continuity and the scale of a large building that plays into aesthetics and how it impacts you around it, I suppose. So we can do some research as we move forward on this. I'm not sure what every other jurisdiction's got on the percentages. I know a lot coverage percentage is extremely common. I would probably feel pretty comfortable in saying 20-25% of your lot could have accessory buildings is not an uncommon thing at all. I don't know for sure on the specific building limitation. We did visit this exact ordinance probably within the last year or thereabouts. It used to have one other provision in it that Mr. Larson referenced where previously it was 20% of your lot minus the house, 10% or up to 3,000 square feet. And so we took out the 3,000 square foot cap, and Mr. Black, I won't put him up at the mic, but referenced that that particular thing was in the ordinance previously because of certain building code requirements. And so it was in harmony with the percentages that has been removed. So it has been looked at recently. I don't think we really approached the 10% item at the time, but we ran into cases where somebody had an acre and they would like to put a barn building on it, and that's a 3,500 or 4,000 square foot building, and so that's probably what stirred that at the time with the 3,000 square feet. So now we're looking at yet another component of that exact ordinance on whether or not it merits change. So be happy to go look at data as staff, show what other communities are doing. Perhaps we do that before we notice something and begin an actual formal ordinance change, just to give you a heads up on here's some comparisons.
My experience has generally been that I've seen a lot of ordinances that have a total lot coverage number, but they don't designate how you apportion that out. So they just say, you know, no more than X percentage of the lot can be covered with structures, period. Whatever that is for the house and the accessory buildings and whatever. So gives you some flexibility.
Yeah.
I think it's totally worth looking into. I think the 20 and 10 distinction or whatever is what's creating the problem. Yeah. Because if I can boil down my understanding of it, if you have 20,000 square foot outside of the main structure, in other words, that's your number you can calculate off of, you could put 2,000 square foot buildings literally right next to each other and meet the ordinance, as long as they're not attached. That just makes no sense, as Mr. Larson already said. Yep. We need to clarify that. We need to make it more simple and not create ridiculous outcomes. And maybe it's just take the 10% out of the picture. Yep. If that's out, then the problem is solved.
I'd be even happy with if we could, if it put burden on me that I had to go get approval of my immediate neighbors or something. You know, I'm not to let neighbors dictate what I do with my property, but there could be some, you know, like show that I've discussed with them. There's some proof or that, you know, isn't going to come and say, oh, now we got this giant building being an eyesore back here in Old Town Caysville where we used to have trees and that. And, well, you know, just. You know, it's just an idea that could put, if there's something that could be put a burden on me that I have to go do, that, you know, that could be something that we could explore as an idea too.
Thank you. All right, so moving along, Lau.
I think just by way of reports, so the City Council at their last meeting had multiple rezones that were on their agenda that have been forwarded by the Planning Commission for approval. They did approve each one of those. I think the most interesting, if I could say to remember, was Crestwood, a commercial rezone. We had the development dealing with that was approved. Other couple residential pieces, and then the by Fiesta Lake, the healthcare to professional business on that existing office building off of Main Street was approved. So that's moving forward as far as calendar items, and we'll be back just on the 28th. We'll work to see what we can get for you on updates to that general plan.
Yeah.
That'll be the big item, and we'll see what other items flow in between now and then to add to it. Unless there are any conflicts that most of you won't be able to make it, we'll catch you in a couple weeks.
All right. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
So adjourned. Thanks, everybody.